Hello there and welcome to my beginner's guide for Songs of Syx. In this video I'm going to give you all the things you need to know to get us started with the game and have fun and explore it. I surely did a ton more guides and videos to this game, but I really did my best to distill all the basic things that you need to conquer the game at your own pace at that point. So let's get started, shall we? We're pressing the play button and random game it is. This is basically the entry point for every sandbox scenario. We can change the difficulty here, so if anything is bothering you difficulty-wise, you can make it either easier or harder on you. We'll keep it default because that's pretty okay, but if something bothers you, it's a sandbox city builder after all. We get to select our main species now. This is by no means a exclusive choice. We can add in whatever we want into the mix. Don't believe the game with its initial challenge thing here. It doesn't mean that the game is particularly easy or anything. It just means that setting up shop with the Gardemi or the Cretonians is particularly easy, but I personally wouldn't recommend either of them to a beginner. To a beginner, I would recommend either the humans, the Tilapi, or even the Emevians. We're going to work here with the humans because they are, except for being a little bit quicker pissed, a really easy to pick up race. The Tilapi are comparable. They are, in my opinion, even easier to pick up as a beginner, but they're also horrible cannibals, so I'll let you choose. We're picking up humans, confirming the selection. Here you can activate titles if you have any, which bring you passive bonuses, but because this is a beginner's guide, we're not going to enter any. The map type, well, we leave it like that. You can choose to your own liking. The world generated next waits for your capital to be placed. What you are looking for is a location that is sitting right next to a sea like that, has a nice amount of forest around it, and if you check out the tooltip here, fertility, you want a number that's as high as possible on that end. Just make sure that the climate is ideally on the temperate side, and check out to get either coal or clay or stone in your vicinity. I'm going to go and look for a place, but one thing, if the world map is not to your liking, you can always refresh it by pressing regenerating, or you can even edit it. So I'll be pausing the video for a second to look for a nice spot. But before I do, one thing, try to avoid spots that are only crossing a river. They are pretty good if you know what you're doing, but for a beginner, I wholeheartedly recommend to sit at the side either of a lake or something like that. High fresh water is a real strong resource. See you in a second. Alright, here's one that I like. This one has a nice access to fresh water. Make sure it's fresh water, not ocean, forest and open land, and 2 pips of clay. The more of these icons you have on your terrain, like your clay, the more you can mine that stuff. Basically everything which is not represented by an icon on the map is not worth mining at all. So choose to your own liking. The only thing that I want to point out as a last thing here is make sure that the tooltip has no warnings like you're isolated or your temperature is wrong. Ideally, when you're new to the game, it should look like this. No warnings whatsoever. Isolation has the problem of no trade partners, and the rest, well, the tooltip states out why it's bad. Trading is extremely important, and the game is impressively harder without. So, the game is now placing down all the other factions, and 90% of the time you will be okay with that. You can also regenerate the faction process, but we're not interested in that. These are all the nations that now exist around you. And the next step that we're going to take is to place down where our throne will be at, and we will be finally able to see where our city will be sitting at. So here, when you zoom out, you see a lot of confusing things. First up, everything which is bordered red is a mineral resource which can be mined one way or another. Every green bordered thing is something you can pluck from the ground and use as forage. And there is a couple of animals white bordered, which you don't need to worry about except for this icon. This nice little fella loves to eat people, so settle not too close to this. You see now that there is plenty of all the resources around, and they are all things that you don't need to pay attention to. They are all, well, pretty much a trap. You can build a mine on them, but the mine will suck. terribly. Only mine the stuff that you've seen on the map. And as you can see here, you are also allowed to regenerate the map as many times as you want. What you're looking for is a spot that has the strategical resources that you've selected somewhere around in an area that you find pleasing. I think this is excellent. Here we have access to all the water that we want. We have a clear plains that we can use to build our city at, and we are bordered by forests which bring wood, which we will use to build our city with. Wonderful location. So we place down our throne like this, and this is now where we've finally entered the game, TM. So, quick overview. Up there in the left corner, you see all your different city-related stats. Amount of citizens, amount of workers available, amount of houses available, and all those things. Over here, we see our wallet and our tech points, game clock, everything which is beyond the capital. Here you can see the world map and switch back to your capital. The mini-map, very important. Your layer lenses, use them wisely, they are super powerful. And your overview about how your citizenship is put together. We have currently 10 humans, and the green bar behind each face is their current happiness. Ideally, that green bar should fill the entire background there. Then that's what you want to go towards to. In the center here, we have all our stored goods. Mind you, stored goods. Everything which is lying on the ground is not going to be found by this menu here. And at the bottom end of the map of the screen, we have our building menu. The most important thing about the building menu is the magnifying glass. Everything you might want to find can be just found by typing it into the search bar. I find this a very important thing to note because the building menu is huge. There is a lot of things that you can and will be needing to use here, and I often end up searching, and this is very, very helpful. Good. The first things that you need to get started here is create food, provide a house and home for everybody, and make people happy. Which order whatsoever. So food is the most important resource to begin with. Your throne is not that important. What's important is that you start out with some stone, some rations for your people to live off of, and livestock to build a pasture with, some wood, and grain. So we're going to utilize the entire starter package here. The grain we can use to make bread out of, which is one of the most efficient ways of making food. We use the livestock to bring up a pasture, which brings us short-term yields in terms of food, and, well, the rest I'm going to show you. So let's start out with the pasture, because we need immediately food. We have rations available, and when you click that plate icon here, you see that your people are eating this much per day. A Syxian year has only 16 days, so one day in this game is pretty long. Don't get it. Don't think it's just a short day. But that means our people will need something to eat ASAP. So that's the first thing we're doing. We're going to the agriculture menu, husbandry. You can breed all manner of different animals. You want to start out with the entelodont, as the entelodont is basically the Syxian pig, which brings a nice yield of meat. The other animals all have other specializations. Next up, the building menu. So you have that green grid on your cursor, and now you can drag and drop, and when you release the button, you see that things have changed. You have that blue grid on the ground, which will be the pasture. So we want to expand that. You can do that by doing this, with the left mouse button being held, and when you right click, you can undo your last action. So what we are working towards to is I want a pasture that hosts 3 to 4 workers. So I'm adding in strips of area until I reach this. So you can always see what kind of output there is. I just strongly recommend you to try to round up your efforts to have a full amount of workers employed. If you want to be a super efficient player, you can try to nudge it up until this point, but it's not really worth it. So next up, we have items to put into the building. We have a gate, which we can rotate by pressing R. We have to face it towards the exit, and huts. The huts will increase the efficiency of this place. Pressing Q and E makes it smaller and larger. We want to crank up the efficiency to 100%, so this will influence the efficiency of our work output. So we now see what we have to pay. We press the check mark, and then we can speed up the time. The wood that we'll have won't be enough though. So you go down here into this area and select the felled tree job, and let's order some trees to be chopped. So in this hammer icon shows you how many odd jobbers you have at your disposal. These will be people that pick up any job, be it the random hauling job, cutting trees, building something. They are basically the people that are looking for work each and every day. Whatever you build early on, try to not build it on this stuff. These are rocks. These take literally forever to be removed early on, and you want to be as quick as possible, especially with that pasture, because your people can live off this stuff for a while, but they will not do so well that much longer. Oddly enough, somebody died. Ow. Why? That's weird. Never seen that like this, but don't you worry. Accidents happen. So we have now the pasture filled. We crank it down to 4 because we know that this is what we need. The next step is going to be we set up a house for our people because they are living without a roof over their head. So next step, we go over here to homes, houses, and create a longhouse for them. Over here you can select the material ought to be used. We are using a wooden building, not mud. Mud is a beginner's trap because mud is free to build, yes, but it also takes forever to build. So wood might be not free to build, but it is at least a really quickly acquirable and quickly utilizable resource. Okay, so here you now see that the numbers go up and the pasture will be now slowly filled with new animals. We don't have enough animals to fill the pasture up initially already, but eventually we're producing more livestock, which will be then used to fill the pasture. Here you see these exclamation marks are a sign that you don't have enough resource. So let's order them to chop some more. Okay, now we see that our production and our consumption rates are positive altogether. That means we are currently producing more food than we are consuming. That is always a good sign. And that is something, the very first thing that you should always be paying attention to. Try to have always more food being produced than consumed. Very, very important. So the next thing that we're going to do after that house is being built is we're going to set up a little grain farm. We don't want that initial grain to be going bad because, as I said, bread via grain is one of the most effective things that we can do. So farms, we set up the grain farm and we now nudge it around again to make it go to 3 farmers. Here the colored ground that you see is fertility. So the more cyan, the brighter the cyan is, and here it even has plus signs, the higher the fertility. Generally everything around 80% is good enough to drop a farm on it. It's up to you how far you want to take the optimization there. Here again, I'm trying to optimize it in a way that we have exactly 3 workers. You see now how much of a daily production it has. We need to invest 29 grain into that. And luckily we have a pile of 39 grain lying around. So we just press now this button twice for 250 times speed. Use it wisely. But it can be sometimes extremely useful for situations like these. Alright. And now our farmers are working. So we have now only 2 more people left, and we need more people. To get more people in our city, we need to right-click that face, and here you see the total happiness of your citizens. It is a very complex system, but all in all, you can click through these windows and see why people are unhappy. For example, there is not a single service in our city. There is a lot of things to be wished for in the environment, and so on and so forth. In these screens, you can research why people are not happy currently. We're going to resolve these things with a couple of easy things first. So, the very, very first thing that I want to put up is in the distribution menu, and that's a food stall. A food stall allows you to distribute the food that you're producing to the people more effectively. This is in so far really, really interesting as every culture or every race that you're playing has certain preferences for food, and they only go happy if they have the food eaten from a food stall. If they have to eat it out of the warehouse, they don't go happy. I only recently learned that. So the food stall now picks up the meat from the pasture and distributes it to the people. And humans happen to love meat. This is the very first thing that we do to make people happier. The other thing that you can and should do is set up easy healthcare things, like a well and a hearth. This can also be increased or decreased in size with Q and E, as many things in this game can. You should really try to do this on any building. And a hearth. The well protects your people from heat and allows them to wash themselves, whereas the hearth allows them to protect themselves from extreme cold. So the grain farm is now going to need an entire year to be actually useful. Yes, that's quite brutal, but up from the next year we'll have bread for ever, basically. And check out here, the food clock is filling because we actually now start storing meat, at least in here. It does not show up here yet, but we're gonna fix that issue in a hot minute. So we got now a well and a hearth. And when you now check into the services tab, you see that people start being happy about that. And there is a ton of different things that you can and should do in that regard. But let's continue with the very next thing. We want a warehouse. So a warehouse is where we store our things. We will draw it here, and you can already see that it's a little bit different. So here we have a building that has walls around it. If you draw it larger, then you'll see that a yellow area will show up. You'll need to stabilize these, as this is a building that is just too large for itself. When you press that red thing, you can start putting pillars into it, and by right-clicking you can remove them. Every pillar does stabilize roughly 4 grids around itself, and it is a very interesting little challenge to make houses that work out just decently. They often look like crap, but at least they are stable. Stability, by the way, does make the building more costly if you don't stabilize the building, so you really don't want to do that. So we make a smallish warehouse here, something like that. We add in a door, very important, and make sure this marker here is not on mud building, because your warehouse will take forever to be built. So we have a door here, and now we put in crates. Just like with the pasture, it's an item that we can put in, and these little arrows around it tell us that there has to be at least one accessible side for these. So we're trying to put in as many as possible. This is a absolute mini game in itself inside of the game to get the best out and most out of your buildings. I'll leave it up to you what you make out of it. I'm not the best crack in this regard. The most important thing though is you need to build it in a way that your people can still move through it. Okay, we fire this off. And another thing that we can and should do are roads. There is the dirt road, which you can just draw all over the place, just like that. Roads have 2 advantages. First off, they make people move faster, and the other thing is they grow happy because there's a road. And before you know it, there's the first yellow arrow besides our dudes. This means that there is somebody waiting for immigration. We authorize that dude, and immediately people go unhappy. Because in Songs of Syx, everybody who's new to the city is probably a bad guy. Jokes aside, immigration is a problematic thing, and people don't like it if there's too many people moving into this place too often. Alright. So we got to wait now until the warehouse is completed. As you see there, it does take a while. I'm authorizing new people the whole time because we happen to have enough food for them to be fed. But be careful to not go past this line. Alright, we have now the warehouse. Now we can press this gear wheel to let the AI pick up workers to transport stuff for us as needed. And now we need to put up crates. Everything that you want to store needs a crate assigned to it. So we're currently producing meat and grain and wood and stone. Every crate holds 80 pieces of a specific good, and I highly recommend you to put up a few more of these. Up here you see the grand total of crates, and there's a bajillion of other configuration things, but when you're just starting out, that's all you need to know. We also add into the stockpile area the bread, because that's going to be the next thing that we're going to do after we have built a new house. So you can always left control click a building to just copy it. It's a pretty nifty thing. We're going to set up the second house back there. As you see there, this number shows you how much housing is available for your people. And it should be always on the positives, because it just makes people unhappy to have no roof above their head, obviously. Okay, after that's been dealt with, now let's move over to process our grain. We have a couple of days until the first harvest is in. And let's move on over here into the refining tab and build ourselves a bakery. This is pretty clearly the building where we process our grain into bread. Bakeries and all types of refineries produce noise. They are loud buildings, and most species hate it to be in noisy environments. The very first bakery of yours does not really need to have more than 6 workers or so. So this is already a big building to begin with. You need here auxiliary ovens to increase the efficiency. It basically all works very similar to like when we've set up the first pasture. This just cranks up the efficiency of the thing. And a storage must be placed down. The storage holds the input and the output. So the storage will hold the fuel for the bakery, the grain for the bakery, and the bread at the end of the day. Okay, so we just need to add in a door here. And we're good to go. So we are missing a little bit of wood, but that's being dealt with. So let's wait until these things are done. Obviously, that does take a little bit of time. We double-click the people to pick up more of them. And now with the bakery in place, we can now easily start baking bread. Currently, we only have a production of, well, 13 pieces of grain per day. You can always mouse over a certain good to see what kind of regular production you got. So every baker roughly consumes 6 grain per day. So that means our current situation is that we can employ 2 bakers out of that field and have some grain on the side to expand our business eventually, because you need grain to plant new grain. It also eats up a certain amount of wood per day, but if we click on here, we now notice that our production versus consumption rate is amazing. So where to from here? There's one more thing or 2 more things that we require. First up, we need to put up a janitor. All ore things that we build will eventually degrade. Without a janitor, this will be a huge problem. So you need to set up these workshops like this. I usually set them up to hold 10 janitors, put in a couple of utilities to make them more effective, and off you go. The janitors can also be configured by this cogwheel icon to tell the game to hire and fire them as needed. Control left click to pick up some more of that road dirt to expand on this. So to get more workers now, you need to make your city happier. You do this by building new things like here, the speaker. And all manner of different new services will make your people happier. The biggest thing you will be working towards from here on is now to get yourself to 25 people. 25 people will be the breakpoint where your city unlocks the right to do science. To do science, though, you need furniture. And furniture is being made out of wood, obviously, so you will need to set up a carpenter. The carpenter is the prime example of any workshop in the game. It takes one resource and transforms it into another. It's just the same as the bakery. You set up a couple of workbenches, you set up a couple of auxiliaries, and then you set up a storage, and you're good to go. Don't make your first workshops too costly, as you don't have that extreme amounts of resource or workforce to facilitate them too well. With the furniture that the carpenter yields, you're not going to be able to build the laboratories that you need. You will also be able to build other really wonderful, powerful buildings like the lavatory, which brings a lot of happiness to the people because guess what? People like to go to the toilet like a civilized person. You can also build hunters, which will provide a steady supply of meat and leather, or leather, you have to decide. And yeah, from that point on, you will be then seeing that there is a huge technology system. The only thing that I want to preview here is that everybody who's working in the science area must be working in the science area forever, because otherwise your knowledge will decay. And yeah, congratulations, now you pretty much know the basics. There are a lot of things to discover here in these menus. Check them out. The game is also, well, much deeper than you might now think from this close outlook, but the most important things in this game are provide food to your people, provide things that make your people happy, and expand the city by bringing in new services, researching new things, and taking care that the happiness never goes too low. These are the major things that you need to know to get the ball rolling. And as a last little tip on the side, every race has different properties and different religions, and there are very cheaply available shrines in the religion tab that you can use to make your people happy. But all in all, the city that we've set up here so far can now only die off of old age, basically, because it can't sustain itself forever. So, congratulations. Your biggest difficulties will now always be that you'll struggle with getting new workers in, you'll struggle with sudden shortages of things because a sudden event smacks your head, and such things. But what I want to stress out is that it's nigh impossible in this game to be successful right from the first city, so don't you worry too much if things go wrong, if things go bad, just keep trying. As last things to note, in your area you will find always neighbors, and these can be bothered to be traded with you. So there is down here a price for that, and you can just offer them whatever you have in your warehouses. My personal recommendation is to try to open up trade as quick as possible with these guys, because you will be able to basically trade one good for another quite decently, and in general, commerce and trading with one species to another is a very, very important part of the gameplay loop. And yeah, I hope you found that helpful. I know it is a very incomplete view on the game, but basically you now know the very most important things to get forward from this point on. In the description box below, I have left you a couple of links to use to your own leisure. I've made, like I said, a ton of tutorials here, so if you want to have a guided tour, I have these on my table as well. Leave me your comments, leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and of course, check out the description box, like I said, at least for the playlist links. And as usual, thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.